In this video, I'm going to be explaining the file and folder structure of a Next.js project. And to run Next.js for the first time, you're running npx space create-next-app at latest. I've gone ahead, and opened up my terminal window, navigated to the desktop, and then gone ahead and ran that command. And we can go ahead and fill out these default items that they're asking. So we can just say, we can call this Next.js tutorial, and then we're going to accept all of these prompts. So yes to TypeScript, ESLint, Tailwind, source as the directory, app router, Turbopack, and no for that last part. We're going to let this load, and it's going to build out our project, and then we're going to go in and open up in Visual Studio Code and break down the different files and folders that you see. Next.js is going to be great for if you're, into React, you're learning React, and you want to start building projects. It's going to be really helpful. Next.js is, in a lot of ways, a really good complete solution that you can get something quickly on the web, and it has, a lot of stuff just built in right out of the box, which is really helpful. So that's why a lot of people switch to Next.js once they're learning React. It's just really good all in all. It's also going to be helpful with Vercel, so it's going to allow you, with Vercel, you can use it in tandem to get that easily up on the web for people to see. So we've gone ahead and created this. Now let's go ahead and open it. And I'm in Visual Studio Code, and I now like to break down what these files and folders mean, especially if you're new to Next.js. It definitely, for myself included, can be a bit overwhelming to understand what does all this mean. So I want to break it down with a bit more clarity as you're learning React and learning Next.js. So to get started, I want to touch on the node modules folder first. So this folder here, it's going to contain all of the requirements or dependencies for your project here to run. You're not going to be really ever editing any of these dependencies or files and folders. It's just, it's allowing you to consistently build a Next.js project. So it's where your actual packages are stored, and whenever you are getting started with Next.js. So you can think of it as an analogy. Think of it in the way node modules is like your human arteries that keep you surviving and alive. This is essentially what node modules is, and it keeps everything running smoothly. Next up, I want to go down a bit and touch on package lock and package JSON. So the package JSON and package lock files work together to manage the dependencies in the Next.js project. They're almost like siblings, you can think, and one is a bit more specific than the other, and I want to explain that a bit more. So with package lock, this is going to be the most specific exact versions of each dependency for the project that you are building on your computer. It's going to ensure consistency across installations, so no matter who's running that npm install at the start, they're going to get the same version of these packages here. So we can honestly go ahead and run npm install just to get things going. Perfect. Now that's going to run these versions here. Now package JSON is allowing a bit more flexibility in the version ranges. So you're going to see, these little brackets in front. That's allowing a bit of more of a range. So this gives room for, updates and new features while still maintaining the compatibility and functionality of your project. So when you run npm install like so, your computer is going to use the exact version specified in package lock, even if a newer version exists in package JSON. So as long as the lock file is in sync with package JSON, then everything's good. It's just going to run everything in package lock. So if something is out of sync, so if a dependency is removed, a dependency is out of this range, then you're going to see an npm, or if let's say you force an update with npm update, that's when things are going to update in package lock. But besides that, it's just going to stay the same whenever you run npm install. The next section I want to talk about is the public folder. The public folder is going to be really useful for any images you want to have like a URL attached that you want to be easily accessible in the browser. So a lot of times that could be like your logo, For instance, that could be images, that could be your sitemap, anything you want to, showcase in the public folder, that can be really good. So you'll see some examples here just out of the default, like the Vercel SVG here, like so. So these are all publicly accessible. And let's say, for instance, you had logo.png in this folder. So what that's going to look like is it's going to be your domain name followed by / and then logo.png. It's not going to be your domain name / public / logo.png. It's just going to be / logo.png. So it's going to be really convenient to get accessible assets with a URL that you can, then target wherever you want on your site. This is going to be helpful for SEO. Now, on the flip side, the other aspect of images that you might be considering is using a next image component. The next image component is not going to have a public URL. It's instead handled internally by Webpack in Next.js, and it's going to have a lot of features and benefits. So that's going to be optimization, like, more efficient file formats like WebP, or whatever's suitable for the user's browser, responsive loading, cache busting. All of this is going to be really beneficial and honestly recommended if you are using, let's say, images for your blog. It's way more worthwhile to just use the image component. This also, best practices, you can put this in a different type of folder, like an assets folder within your source. And then you can also, recommended more likely is just you're going to want to put those images in the cloud, such as using Supabase, using some place where you can store all those images, and then you can then access them and place them on your website. Now the next folder I want to touch on is the source folder here, and the source folder is your workbench you can think of. So for the majority of the code you're typing, it's going to be in source. It's going to be where you're actually building out your app, your website, your project. This is where you're going to be working. And it's going to hold a app folder. Now this app folder is going to serve, it's really cool, it's going to serve as, a way to build out pages for your website. So for instance, let's say, you have a home page, which is this page.tsx in a way, and then you've got, let's say you want to blog on your website. You can create a blog folder with an app, and that blog folder is then going to be a new URL extension. So it's going to be your domain name / blog. Now to get that working, it requires a folder within this app folder, and then it requires a page.tsx, and you also can add a layout.tsx if you want to. So page.tsx is where you actually add the code for a component that you're building. Let's say, in this case, we're seeing the home component, but let's say you can, create a blog folder with an app, create a component or, with a function, of blog. So the name of the folder is blog. And that's going to then have, its own URL. So it's going to be domain name / blog. Now layout.tsx is really, really helpful because you can have different types of layouts for different parts of your website. So a really easy way that is helpful for when I was learning is, think of, let's say you have your front-facing client website. So you have the main website that everyone goes to and looks at. You might have a lot of similarities on different pages, like your contact page, your about page, your home page could all have the same nav bar, could all have the same footer, the same sidebar. All of that type of stuff would be great to put in layout.tsx because you want it reusable across those pages. Now on the flip side, let's say you have a admin dashboard. You want to update your blog posts on your website. Similar to, let's say, think of a WordPress. You go to the admin dashboard, you're creating posts and pages. You could do the same for your Next.js project. So you go ahead and create this admin folder. Within the admin folder, you're going to put a page.tsx, but also a layout.tsx. And the layout.tsx is where you can add that additional features and components that are solely specific to the admin dashboard, solely specific to you and making updates to your blog posts. And so that layout allows you to, customize your website the way you want to and have it reusability across the pages that all have that layout in common. Great. So that is for the most part, you could largely ignore a lot of these files and folders and just focus on this. This is where you primarily are working, and everything else, goes into, a different purpose and place, which we're going to wrap up with and touch on. Now, the next one I want to touch on is the .next folder, and it's not currently here. We actually have to add that. So it's not initially visible in your project when you're running npx create next app at latest. When you initialize a Next.js project, you instead need to run this with a command to create this .next folder. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We can say npm run dev, and it's going to spin this up, and then you will see that next folder has been added, and you will see that now we can view this in the browser like so. So this is we've spun up a Next.js project here. Okay, so let's break down what this actually does. So npm run dev, this is essentially creating a test development version locally only on your computer to view in the browser your project. And this is going to be at that local host. So when you do npm run dev, it's going to run that. If you do npm run build, this is going to give you a test production version locally where you can again view in localhost. The benefit of npm run dev, it's going to include automatic refresh, which is really helpful, and hot reloading essentially, refresh on code updates. And so all of that's going to be really helpful when you're working on a project. And then when you're closer to a final version and you want to get an idea of how it's going to look for the public and the speed and everything, you can do npm run build to view that version. Those versions that you're spinning up are going to be stored in this .next folder. So you run those commands, it's going to be stored here, and then you can view it in the browser. The next section I want to mention is .gitignore. .gitignore is going to be useful for excluding any bloat in your project. So when you want to save this project as a repository in your GitHub, you're going to want to go ahead and use .gitignore to remove that bloat. Some big folders you want to remove are going to be the node modules. It has tons and tons of folders and files, and you don't need that in your repository, taking up memory and space. So you're going to see here, essentially you create .gitignore file. It's already been created for you, and you're going to just add the names of the folders and dependencies that you don't want to be saved when you store it, let's say in GitHub as a repository. That's going to help, as I mentioned, with the enormous file sizes, it's going to reduce that. It's also a good place for if you're using a .env file for environmental variables, for sensitive information like API keys, passwords, anything you are using. You want to put a .env file, or you want to put that environmental variable file in .gitignore so it's not saved in your repository and accessible to the public. That's private information. Now, to clarify the .env is allowing you to use sensitive data to spin up your project on your local device. That .env data is then going to be added to something like Supabase, somewhere where you're, somewhere like Vercel. You're using, let's say you have your blog stored on Supabase or somewhere. You're then going to put all of that, data in .env, and then you're going to move that over to Vercel or wherever you're launching your website, and that's going to be safely stored there. It's not going to be accessible in the browser. You're not going to put that .env in your GitHub in the public. It shouldn't be accessible by any means. And so that's the great benefit of .gitignore, and be sure to use it and take advantage of it. Now, the next items I want to touch on are the config files, and those are going to be these items here that I want to touch on. And let's go break down each one. So we've got ESLint config.mjs. This is going to be the ESLint configuration file, and it can be adjusted to change how errors are spotted in your project. So you can either be more strict or more lenient, but for the most part you don't really need to be in this often. It's just to make some tweaks and adjustments if needed. You've got the next-env.d.ts file for TypeScript. This config file is for when you use TypeScript with Next. So it's going to allow TypeScript to better understand a Next.js project. For the most part, you don't really need to, be in here. Then you've got the next.config.ts file. This is going to be the Next.js config file if you wish to modify any of the Next.js defaults. You can go ahead and do that here. We've got the postcss.config.mjs, and this is going to be postcsconfig file, and it's a tool that processes your CSS and allows you to use modern CSS features such as polyfills, which are is code that allows modern functionality to work in older browsers, and it even allows JavaScript to enhance your styles. So postcss, if you need to, this is just the config file for that. And then finally, you've got the tsconfig.json. Now this is going to be the TypeScript config file and controls how TypeScript compiles your TypeScript code in JavaScript. You can customize this file, you can customize TypeScript for your project in this file if needed, but besides that, you can leave it alone as is. And lastly, I want to mention the README. The README is, it's a file that you can use to add, important documentation about your project. Next.js is including this out of the box to, provide users like us a bit more details about, initializing a Next.js app for the first time and understand it a little bit more about this project and how it's, been built. So that's what that's for. You can, keep it, remove it. It's there for just additional details. So overall, that's everything for a quick breakdown of Next.js. Gives a bit more clarity of how the folder structure works. That was something, for myself that was a bit confusing when I first started, and wanted to just, break it down a bit more so there's more clarity. So if you are interested, stay tuned in the future for more videos like this. Feel free to check out my website, matthewseward.com. But other than that, thanks so much and have a great day.